Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Chris Thurber, and I'm really excited to be joining you virtually from New Hampshire for today's webinar, Engaging Millennials. If you have questions or you want to chat during the webinar, I'll pause periodically and give you a chance to do that. I know some of you are gathered together in a room, others of you are watching the webinar remotely, and for anyone who's not joining us, then you're watching a recording of this webinar, which is also, I hope, very engaging, although you won't be able to live chat. But if there are questions, please go ahead and chat in the window there. It's always easier to do that than activating people's microphones and having people worry about interrupting one another. So Gabe and I were thinking this would be a fascinating topic, and I know that he's spoken with some of you about the work that you do every season with staff and the notion that there may be some specific things unique to the millennial generation. So I'll go back and forth between sharing some research, editorializing a bit, showing you some slides, and answering your questions. And hopefully the variety of the formats that we're using is something that gives everyone some practical tools that they can use by the end of the webinar. When people talk about millennials, they're primarily talking about people who are now between, say, the ages of I guess about 18, or maybe we can bring it down to age 16, but somewhere in their late teen years, the beginning of the time you would hire staff, and maybe extending to about age 35. You know, every generation, I suppose, has a label, whether it's baby boomers or, you know, Gen X or millennials. And one of the things that people have spoken about a lot informally and blogged about is, how do we engage millennials? And there's even been some blogging about objecting to the word engaging millennials. But before we get to some of the research-based observations about this cohort from, let's say, ages 18 to 35, certainly the group that you're going to be hiring each season to work with you at camp, or in the off season, if those are the programs you have, I think we need to take a look at maybe what it was like for a lot of us. I'm 48, so I guess, you know, I'm not a baby boomer. I may be, you know, Gen X. I don't necessarily put myself in any particular category, but I want you to reflect back on what I think is probably familiar for a lot of you, and that is a cartoon that you may have watched back when you were 6 or 7, if you're my age, the Jetsons. So I'm going to screen share here and go through what are some interesting you know, slides, and probably encourage you to take a look at this in your own time when you, if you don't quite remember the beginning of the Jetsons. I'll replay my contact information at the end there. So let me just ask this question and ask you to type your responses to this query in the chat box, and that is, you know, what were we hoping for back in the 60s and 70s? If you were born then, if you did some growing up in the 60s and 70s, if you watched the Jetsons as I did, then you may have had some thoughts about what things would be like in 2016 or 2017. So, you know, I think it's interesting. I'll play this knowing that it's going to hitch a bit in the playback during the webinar here. That's not what's important. It's the visual, it's the memories. So humor me here for a few seconds and watch this. We'll talk. All right, so let me ask you, what are some of the things that, whether you watch the Jetsons or not, and no matter how old you are, what are some of the things that, as a young person, as a child or adolescent, you were hoping for in the future, either professionally or personally or recreationally? Go ahead and type your answers into the chat window there, and let's see what people think. What your thoughts are about the way we may have been envisioning the future. Give people a second to respond. And if you're having any challenges typing into the chat window there, you should be able to just do it on your laptop. But if the computer is kind of remote and that's not an easy thing to do, I certainly understand. It's not going to impede our progress here in the webinar. But let's begin by saying every generation, of course, looks toward the future to wonder what is it going to be like. And a few of the things that I see here in the Jetsons clip that I think are pretty remarkable are, first of all, the notion that things would be easier is pretty clear there. That there would be something that we could do, something that we could perhaps technology would make our lives easier. Perhaps there would be a way to get around that would be not only easier but more fun. It would be in some way simple. It's also pretty remarkable to most people that there is this very gender specific expectation that the man's going to go to work and the woman is going to go shopping, and some people would even critique the fact that well, the man goes to work, but the first thing he does is put his feet up on the desk, so he's not really working. It's his wife that's going out and doing things. What is also remarkable, and I think probably true for many generations, that technology is something we hoped would simplify life, and that is much more complicated perhaps, and is making life more complicated than we had anticipated. It's just one of the things to note as we talk about generational differences, with an eye toward how can we be the best owners, directors, supervisors, colleagues of this current generation of folks we're hiring to work with us as staff members. They also may have some unfulfilled expectations, and they also may be a bit confused about how to proceed. One of the things that I've found fascinating as I've researched this topic is that millennials, for as much as they might be derided as lazy or difficult to engage, are actually extraordinarily engaged. That is to say, they participate more than previous generations ever did in social causes, even more so than the generation that was active in the 60s, the boomers. They are better educated. We have more millennials going to high school and graduating from college than ever before. But they may not be engaged in ways that youth development professionals would necessarily like. So, for example, they're finishing their educations much later. They're getting jobs much later. They are shouldering what we might think about as typical adult responsibilities much later. So that also means that their net worth is lower, and I mean that in a very straightforward financial sense. You look, 30 years ago, so before the birth of most of these millennials, the net worth of an individual in adjusted dollars to compare to 2016 dollars when they graduated college was somewhere around $50,000, $60,000. So they didn't have a lot of debt. That is, sorry, when they were 30 years old. So not just graduating college, but into their careers. Now it's something like $4,000. So primarily as a byproduct of incurring a lot of student loans and finishing their education much later, their place in life is different. And people always talk about, oh, well, Romeo and Juliet were only 14 when, they were together. And look, there's no question that times change and generations differ, but certainly the slides I'm about to show you are more understandable, and perhaps you'll feel a tiny bit more compassionate if, for example, you are able to relate to the fact that they're starting major milestones with different timing than perhaps many of you did. All right, so what I'd like to do is show you some of the research findings that I've come across, and share with you some of the practical tips that come from that you can actually leverage. And I did say here, we're responsible for both some of the problems that we might perceive millennials have, as well as the solutions. So it's with a very positive and optimistic outlook that I show you the following slides. We want to contribute to millennials' success, and that not only makes your camp or summer youth program run more smoothly, it also means that you are contributing in important ways to the entire generation and their success. All right, so here is the first of 10 points. Millennials crave purpose. The research that's been done with millennials suggests that they do lead purpose-driven lives. In other words, even more so than in previous generations, they want to be connected to some sort of movement, higher cause, and perhaps this is made easier through technology or social networking that allows you to connect to different things very quickly, whether that's the hashtag of a cause on Twitter or somebody's Facebook page. It could also be something that's not technologically based, but there are more and more students who are doing a gap year. If not something that is a multi-year commitment like the Peace Corps, they may at least be contributing in some way to a cause for a year between the end of high school and the beginning of college or university. So it's interesting because that gives us a certain work angle to leverage. As camp owners and directors, the things that you can keep an eye on are the following. First, clarifying your mission and articulating it during all phases of your contact with this group. So hiring, training, summer traditions, these are all different points in the trajectory of a millennial with whom you have contact, where you have an opportunity to clarify your mission. This is what we do at this camp. At this camp, we stand for this. This is our mission. This is our motto. And something that is just a sentence or a phrase like God first, others second, myself last, whatever it might be, that's an opportunity to restate and clarify the mission that is part of your life's work and help it feel like their life's work as well. Obviously, this is going to make them feel better about their work for you, which has the direct result of more loyalty, more tenure with you, returning for more summers, and I would hope also working harder for you. It's important also for millennials, perhaps more important than previous generations, to describe the rationale for rules and policies, to clarify the purpose of their work. Millennials don't just want you to tell them what to do, they want to know the reason for it. And that's particularly important given that some previous generations, whether it was baby boomers or the generation before that, that was happy to do things, or if not happy, compliant at least with doing the things that their bosses told them to do. This is still very much part of the culture in some parts of the United States, but certainly in other parts of the world. Not questioning authority, not needing a rationale, being happy to have a job, working hard, and doing what is asked of you. It might feel entitled to some of you if it stands in stark contrast to the way that you grew up, but it is definitely something that characterizes this current generation. They do very much want to be told the rationale for what it is that they're doing, and I think that's important. I think it's something that's fairly easy for most owners and directors to do, and I can't overstate the importance of that. I will pause here before I move to the second slide and simply say that if anyone is having trouble texting, or not texting, but adding to the chat, it might be great if someone could text me and let me know. There's not a lot technologically that I can do from this end, but my mobile 603-557-8100, which is also on my website, is something that you could certainly text me and just let me know what your questions are, and we can use texting my phone as an alternative way to send me questions. So I'm going to put that up on the chat window. There we go. All right. Now let's move on to slide number 2 here. Next concept. Millennials enjoy intellectual growth. This generation between, say, 18 and 35 really appreciate skill development for its own sake as well as for its career advantages. So as owners and directors, we have a work angle to leverage here, which is to facilitate acquisition of certifications and specialized training. So whereas you might be used to giving people, lifeguarding skills and certifications just because you need them for ACA accreditation purposes, you now need to understand that being more generous and offering to not just those who are on the waterfront, but to anyone who's interested, the possibility of taking a lifeguarding course, or if they take it on their own, reimbursing them for that course, or wilderness first responder, whatever it might be. And some of these courses cost a fair amount of money. What you should realize is not only will additional training and certifications be an asset to your staff, but this is something that they really appreciate, and they don't necessarily need to use it at camp, but the fact that camp is contributing to their professional development, once again, cultivates loyalty, makes them feel good about working with you, will bring them back summer after summer. And there are many camps that will offer contract bonuses. Doesn't need to be an extra $1,000, can be an extra $50 if you have a lifeguarding cert, an extra $50 for a first aid cert, or if you want to tier it in some way, $50 for first aid, $100 for lifeguarding, $250 for wilderness first responder. That's the sort of thing that will really make a difference. And again, they don't necessarily need to use the cert at camp. The fact that you've endorsed it, the fact that you've allowed them to get it, the fact that you have reimbursed them or even given them a bonus is going to make a huge difference. I've gotten a couple of texts from Gabe and from Andy Slensky. I really appreciate that. Just saying hello, liking the content. And I have enabled the chat window from my end. Don't understand exactly why it's not coming through. I apologize for it being disabled on your end. But hey, texting me on my phone is also going to work. So keep the texts coming, 603-557-8100. And hey, I'll get to have more contacts on my phone. So that'll be cool too. All right, number 3 here. Millennials like high tech. Now, that's not a news flash to anyone, and it's not just millennials that like high tech. There are a lot of younger people, a lot of older people that like technology as well. But this is a generation that was really raised on technology, and they use it for everything: for shopping, for entertainment, for banking, for socializing, for learning. And what's cool about recognizing that is this gives you a couple of different advantages as a camp owner director. You can, first of all, create some virtual space for the staff to connect. That can be prior to the season, can be post-season, to keep people enjoying what it is that, their connection to camp is. This is also a great way to bring together new staff and returning staff. So you can start doing this kind of virtual team building, and it's as simple as creating a Facebook page that might be a closed group, and that way they need to be invited to join, and you don't have to make all of the posts public. You can do the same thing with Twitter. There might be a password protected page on your website where you can ask your web developer to just do a little bit of a virtual bulletin board. Very simple stuff. And this is really a cool way. If you don't do it, they'll do it on their own. And there's nothing wrong with that, except you don't get to moderate the conversation. If you own the Facebook page or you're an admin on the Facebook page, if you have your web developer create a electronic bulletin board on a password protected page of your website, you get to see the posts before approving them and having them go up. You get to be part of the conversation. You get to pose questions. It's really important that you do that because, as I said, they're going to do it on their own if you don't, and you want to be part of the conversation. And also providing opportunities for some self-paced e-learning, whether that's content you create and post yourself, whether you subscribe to expert online training, which is the library of 105 videos that I've put up online with 23 other talented faculty members. But this is a way that they're used to learning. I mean, as recently as 7 or 8 years ago, the number of college students that were integrating some kind of online learning into their official degree was 12%. Now it's upwards of 80%. So that means 80% of what we would think of as typical college students have an online component to their coursework. And you're, assigning some e-learning of whatever sort you choose, like sending an email to all of your staff and saying, this is a really cool TED Talk, watch this one before opening day or before you arrive for our on-site training, or something more formalized like expert online training. All of it is going to be expected, appreciated, and engaging to them. So that's a fantastic way to do it. I'm going to move now to number 4. And don't worry, I will send out a slide deck so that, or, a summary of the slides in handout format to Gabe, who can distribute them to everyone. So should have said that at the beginning, but you don't need to frantically write any of this down. Keep writing if that helps you, and also know that I'll send it to you as a handout. Millennials are worldly. Again, no newsflash here, but good to recognize that they were brought up contributing to a worldwide audience, right? Believing that they could make a huge difference, and in some cases making a huge difference, whether that is a hashtag that goes viral, a video that goes viral, a Facebook post that people share a ton, or something on Instagram, or a blog that they contribute to that is shared, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, 1,000,000 times. The rapidity with which we can connect and share has enhanced the first factor that I shared, which is wanting to contribute and be part of something bigger than themselves. Now, again, it could be construed as that this is a lot of entitlement, that it breeds arrogance and narcissism, and people think that just because they can publish something online that means they're an author in the old-fashioned sense, or that people even care about what it is that they're posting. I'm going to stop screen sharing here and just share with you an anecdote that is pretty remarkable to me. I had a student come into my office, which is right here, and she was terribly upset. And I first, provided some empathy and figured she's going to tell me the specifics of what it is that's bothering her in a minute. And when she calmed down a little bit and was crying less hard, I did say, this is obviously something really painful. I'm really glad that you came in. Can you tell me what's on your mind? Fully expecting her to say that she had recently learned of a death in the family, or her pet died, or that she'd failed a biology test, or something of some magnitude. And what she said was, she'd taken a really cool picture of the sunrise. She'd posted it on Instagram, and it was already noon, and nobody had liked the photo. And look, for somebody who is 16, who was used to getting a lot of likes on Instagram, that was a huge deal to her. I would be lying to say that I didn't, that I didn't have to make an effort to provide some genuine empathy, but I really did, after I blinked once or twice, understand that, this was something that made sense to her. Many of you have heard me say before, all behavior makes sense to the actor, and it's one of the best ways that we can, empathize. But look, when we put ourselves in the shoes of someone who is used to getting social praise virtually for things that to us might seem inconsequential, then I think we can be a bit more compassionate. But, without passing judgment, it's important to recognize that a lot of the staff that you're going to hire are used to getting that frequent feedback. They're used to getting it from anonymous sources, and they're certainly used to making a big splash and a big difference. For some of them, it's a wonderful social cause. For others, it might be things that we would consider trivial, but there is, as there have been for these other concepts, some really interesting ways that you can now leverage that. So we go back to the slides here for a second, and it's it's not hard for us to think about ways that we can capitalize on their having been brought up with so much anonymous, rapid social reinforcement. One way is not virtual at all. We're going to ask them to be creative and discuss and debate the things that are important at camp. In the same way that you might provide a rationale for a policy that you never had to before, but you understand why you need to now. Take some of your most vexing camp problems, whether it's how do we actually get people to sort recycling from garbage, or how do we get people to be more on time for the start of activity period so that kids aren't sitting around waiting, or how do I get staff to cash their checks and not lose them because it's the first time they've actually held a physical check. The things that might cause you to tear your hair out are actually the same things that you can charge them to attack and solve for you. And it doesn't mean you need to do what they recommend, but what I'm telling you is that they love to be engaged in high-level thinking about significant problems that are facing the camp. It doesn't have to be the world. So give them an opportunity to discuss and debate. And the second thing is give them an opportunity to contribute to program design and implementation. This is something that can be virtual. You can start a discussion thread on your virtual bulletin board or on your private Facebook page or on the private Twitter feed where you're posing some kind of is it possible for us to have more than 8 kids at a time shoot archery? Can anyone think, is it a question of adding more targets? Is it a question of doing signups differently? Can anyone think of a place in camp where we might have a second archery range? Whatever it might be. And I'll tell you, this kind of engagement, whether it's during the season or off season, in program design and implementation is one of the coolest ways you can harness their intellectual power to improve your camp. There are limits to what you might be able to change mid-season, but in the off season, when it's the perfect time to brainstorm, how cool is it if your staff can come up with something that they feel some ownership over and make some huge improvements to your camp? So cool to read from Gabe that people are resonating with the Instagram story. I'll tell you, it changed the scope of my clinical practice to empathize with not getting likes. Okay, point 5, millennials want real responsibility. I mentioned having a sense of agency, which we all enjoy, whatever generation we are, but millennials' egos are healthy, and that increases their hunger for important duties. Now, again, I steer clear of the judgments that sound curmudgeonly, that sound like I'm an old fuddy-duddy, and when I hear people say, oh, this generation of millennials, whatever, I'm like, you know what? I think probably everybody over 40 has said that about everybody under 30 or under 20 at some point. I don't think the generation gap phenomenon is ever going to disappear. And if we've made a deliberate career choice to work with young people, to hire them, to train them, to advance their careers, which is exactly what we're doing, then I think we're positioning ourselves best if we don't judge the difference, but instead recognize it and learn from it, and actually, as I have on every slide here, leverage it. So how do we benefit from the fact that millennials are hungry for important duties? Well, one is, and I know that Gabe and Andy have heard me say this before, we've got to avoid the pitfall, all of us, in whatever day camp, overnight camp, other summer youth programs, of giving the crap jobs to the junior staff. It can't be that after your final year as a camper, if you are invited back and trained as a junior staff member, whether you call those, JCs, junior counselors, junior leaders, leaders core, there's all different names for this first tier of staff, but they do tend to get more work duties. They tend to be the only people in the dining hall that are cleaning up the service after a meal. They tend to be responsible for a lot of equipment repair and movement. And I don't think that's fair. Not only is it sort of classist, but without using any ists or isms, it's a clear message to them that they are not as appreciated as people who get some of the more glamorous jobs. And look, there's crummy jobs to do in every family, in every corporation, in every camp, but I feel like the more experienced staff are setting a really good example if they contribute to that work and they share it. And, there's nothing better, both as a metaphor and literally, than everyone seeing the director unclog a pot. And I'm not saying that the directors need to become the facilities people, but boy, if you show that you're not above grabbing a plunger and doing what needs to be done, it sends a great message to the rest of your staff. The flip side of that is when you give your junior staff important responsibility, you get buy-in instantly in that first year. You start plugging them into a career at your camp, and they do feel valued right out of the blocks. The sort of partner leverage angle that I have here is to provide whatever training is necessary for all levels of staff to shoulder legitimate resume building responsibility. So let me, sort of pause there and editorialize a little bit on camera. When you give them these certifications that you're helping to underwrite financially, or maybe even paying for completely some of these cool courses that they want to take that have direct or indirect relevance to their job for you, and maybe even give them a bonus on their contract, you're also giving them something that is real world experience. It is resume building. And I think that you can coach them on how to include that in a resume for whatever their next job might be. Now, hopefully they'll be with you for many years. A few of them might even end up to be the future director of the camp you're working at or that you own right now. I'll send you with the handout for this webinar, my most requested handout, which is how to put a camp job on your resume. Very few camp staff ever email me for any other handout, like, hey, what was the one on skillful discipline or whatever? I mean, I think they use it during the season, but it's the putting camp jobs on your resume that ends up to be most useful to a lot of these staff. And I'll send it to Gabe for distribution to the association, and let them, take some credit for giving that to them, and also, invite them to share with you their resume in the off season. Invite them to allow you to proofread it. The way that they word their responsibility they had with you not only might, give them a better shot at whatever job they're trying for, but people just millennials like just having that resume. They may field some offers, but end up declining them. And the fact that you are participating in their professional development is really awesome. It's not enough to say, I really want you to come back to camp, and, don't pay attention to the pressure you're getting from your parents or from anyone else, your peers, about you need to have an internship. They know that you know that, and if you say don't pay attention to it, it devalues it a little bit. There is that pressure out there, and look, camp is a huge part of my career, so I'm always touting its value, and it's made me a better dad. It's made me a better psychologist. It's made me a better faculty member, here at Phillips Exeter Academy. It's done a lot of wonderful things for me. It's made me the person that I am to a great extent, which I think is a good thing. I don't know, but look, you've got a lot of staff who don't realize that, and one of the ways that you can reify it, one of the ways you can make it real, that their camp experience is a legitimate professional resume building experience, is partly through how seriously you train them. It's partly through distributing the glamour jobs and the menial jobs across the board and along the different levels of the staff hierarchy. And it's partly by copy editing their resume, or at least giving them this handout so that they can see, this is actually an incredible professional experience. All right, I'm going to switch back to the slides here, and we'll move on to number 6. Millennials like creature comforts. Oh, this is the one where, you know, if you're not groaning, I'll groan for you. Like, oh, really? I mean, isn't camp supposed to be about at least some mild hardship or physical challenge, you know? And we are not Lewis and Clark, but boy, you know, it is part of the sort of foundational mission of all camps, of all different types, specialty, generalist, day, overnight, that you're expressly having this experience without your parents standing right there, that it's not supposed to be coddling kind of, you know, this isn't Club Med. That's awesome, but you know, we want them to have a different experience, and for most of us that means a recreational experience away from home in a beautiful natural setting. Also wonderful programs on college campuses, and the point is, being in the fresh air is really essential for kids' growth and development. But boy, we've also become accustomed to, especially this millennial generation, of having our phones in our pockets, and it's not just a phone, it's a mini computer, and it does everything. And you know, you've got Wi-Fi everywhere, and there's something defective with the camp if it doesn't have a hotspot in the staff lounge, and you know, there needs to be an app for your camp and all the rest. I'm like, you know what? Not at all. There are incredibly successful camps like Camp Pathfinder in Algonquin Provincial Park that has, you know, electricity in only 2 of its buildings, running water in only 1, and everybody else, you know, does just fine with flashlights and campfires, and they take, you know, 7, 14, 28-day, 40-day, you know, canoe trips in the Boundary Waters and all the way up to Hudson Bay without extensive technology. Notice I said without extensive technology. Even the most rugged, rustic, you know, let's say tripping camps, and there are many wonderful camps like that in the U.S., especially where you guys are, in Wisconsin and Minnesota, and they need satellite phones in case there's an emergency. So I'm a fan of technology, especially when it can serve a safety purpose or a community building purpose. There are ways that we can leverage the fact that millennials like their creature comforts, but I want to caution you here. The first bullet point is, please make it congruent with your mission. Don't air condition all the cabins just because somebody said they got hot. Don't even buy fans because somebody said they got hot. Open the windows, have rest hour outside, tell people to put on sunscreen and a hat. You know, as Wendy Mogul famously said, there is virtue in a skinned knee. You're not going to engineer injuries and hardship for people, but you know, part of making a transition from inside to outside in the 21st century is you need a little bit of preparation, and it might feel different, but that actually could be a character building experience. So only introduce technology that is congruent with your mission. And before you do anything, like put Wi-Fi in the staff lounge, if you don't already have it, ask a focus group of experienced staff what they want that is congruent with the mission. It might surprise you. You know, you might, as a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old, think, well, I think I know what staff want. They want this, or they want that. When actually the truth is, there might be a significant cohort of your staff, all millennials, that actually love the fact that they get a break from technology. The last thing they want is to respond to daily emails or texts. So don't make a misstep here by having a creature comfort be either incongruent with your mission and thereby eroding it, or providing something that actually nobody wants. All right, number 7 here. Millennials love life hacks. And if you don't know what that is, just a shortcut that is an elegant solution to some sort of problem. It's not just being expedient, but it's being creative and it's being effective. So what are the ways you can leverage this? Well, look, you can set up staff, and I love this. We just started doing it a couple of years ago at Belknap. 113 years that the camp where I spend most of the summer has been around, and only recently, within the last couple of years, did we provide mentors, individual mentors for younger staff. It's important for everybody to have some guidance and feedback, especially important for newer staff or younger staff. But like, everybody on the staff should have someone they can go to and say, it's awesome that you're my mentor. This is what I'm struggling with right now. Could be even somebody the same age. Notice I didn't say it needs to be an older mentor, but when you have someone who is a little bit more experienced, regardless of the difference in chronological age, if there even is one, that's someone who can say to you, you know what? Yeah, like, I watched you try to get this group of kids quieted down before you explained the rules to capture the flag. And you did a classic strategy, which a lot of people do, which is raise your voice and shout, everybody quiet down, and then you blew your whistle, and it was like a lot of noise, and it took the kids a long time to quiet down. Let me show you this trick. You can, put your fingers together, and you can hold them up like this, and you can teach everyone on the first day. Do you guys know who this is? This is Silent Coyote. And whenever you see Silent Coyote, right? And so, I had someone explain that to me when I was a younger, leader, and which admittedly was 30 years ago, but okay, still works today, just as effective. You introduce it on the first night, and again, day camp, overnight camp, doesn't matter, but Silent Coyote, or some people have just raise your hand, but something that is a signal that doesn't require a lot of yelling. You don't need a whistle. And gets the group quieted down really fast with a lot less energy. Many of you have heard me make the analogy, like, effective leadership techniques usually don't take any more energy than a tic tac, like a 10-calorie breath mint. If you're jumping up and down, in a lot of ways, you're contributing to the energy of the group, and they may want to talk more and bounce around more. Silent Coyote is a perfect example of a technique that I would consider to be a life hack. That's a great way to be an effective camp counselor and conserve your energy for the things that really matter. So mentors can do that, and they can share a lot of life hacks as well as leadership hacks. And then, second bullet point here is ethical, effective, innovative strategies, because they are hugely appealing, are things that you can ask any staff, new, old, returning, young, whatever, to share with the rest of the group during your all staff meeting, or during, a smaller divisional meeting or unit meeting, whatever it might be. When staff get a chance to share what they've learned, even if it's in a way that is humorous or sarcastic or kind of parodies things, they're going to remember it. I hope Andy Schlensky won't mind me telling the really cool story of when I visited North Star, and unbeknownst to me, the staff had been told that I was coming on that day, and decided that it would be a really fun way to celebrate and also poke fun at expert online training and the videos that I have made, by dressing up in my usual staff training outfit, which is the polo shirt and khaki shorts. And that was so cool, and so much fun for me to see. Like, everybody comes into breakfast and they've all got a polo shirt tucked into their khaki shorts, and so we were just cracking up. And they also did a really fun parody of some EOT videos that they posted on YouTube and shared with me, and I was flattered. But it also and it reminds me that in whatever small way I was able to virtually mentor the staff at North Star, that's something that every staff is capable of doing in-house, in addition. And sharing some of what we've learned is a cool way to celebrate the work of camp and that commitment to continuous professional development. Okay. Speaking of work, millennials value honest feedback. They're as competitive as you and I are, maybe more so. They're also collaborative. They want to know how they're doing. They want to be given a chance to improve. very, very old school. When I was a young counselor, we didn't get feedback. You did the best you could during the summer, and maybe you got a contract next January, maybe you didn't, but it was a huge waiting game, and the only way you knew was by looking in the mailbox. Now, I think corporate culture as well as camp culture has adopted a more effective, I think, routine of giving frequent feedback. And I think because the pace at camp can be really frenetic, it's essential that you protect regular time for supervisors to give staff detailed feedback, to help them set goals at the beginning of the summer and revisit those goals periodically. If your unit leaders or division heads or other supervisory staff are simply told, hey, you know what, be sure to give some feedback to your supervisees over the summer, I guarantee that it won't happen much at all, because we're so busy, and truthfully, feedback is not always easy to give. You need practice giving it. You need to see that it works. You need to establish rapport. It takes time. But if you say, we're protecting time every week in everybody's schedule for every new person to meet with their supervisor, or all of the LITs to meet with the leadership director, or every cabin leader or counselor to meet with his or her assistant, whatever it might be, there needs to be protected time in the schedule. Given the pace of camp, it's really important, and it's something that millennials expect. I would also give the advice, and I've seen it not from a research basis, but in blogs that people have written about millennials, or blogs that millennials have written about their bosses: don't sugarcoat it, don't BS us, and don't be formulaic. So yes, it was taught, and I think that 15 years ago I used to teach myself. One great way to give feedback is start with some genuine praise, offer the constructive criticism, follow up with some praise, as if that's supposed to make it more palatable. What ends up happening is that feels predictable and formulaic to millennials, and they feel as if you're not taking them seriously. They feel as if you think they're fragile, that if you were to simply give criticism, that would be so direct and so uncouched in any sort of buffer, that they're going to fall apart, that they're going to decompensate. And the truth is the opposite. If praise is only ever given by a director or a supervisor as a prelude to criticism, they're not going to hear the praise. They're just going to wait for the other shoe to fall. If you try to sugarcoat things, they're going to feel that you don't trust them. And of course, if you BS, they're going to know right away that it's just not genuine. So all those things, I think, hurt the relationship rather than help it. And what you want to do is be direct and offer feedback that is positive. That is to say, you're telling them not just what not to do, but making some suggestions about what to do, that is immediate, that is specific, and it's heartfelt. I also want to encourage you to give genuine praise. And sometimes it's praise without anything after. Just, you did an amazing job with the tournament. I could see that the kids were having fun. It was a really smart move to put life jackets on everyone, even the kids who were knee deep in water, so that everyone felt it was a fair competition. Full stop. No criticism. Sometimes what you do is you just praise and you leave. Sometimes you give criticism and you leave. Sometimes you give a combo, but don't be predictable. Number 9, millennials like games. So, okay, well, camp is supposed to be fun and full of games anyway, but here's a generation that was really brought up on complex interwoven systems. What I mean by that is social media, which allows people to, like or not like. They are used to rapid advancement, not necessarily professionally, but they also, they're used to, like in these massive multiplayer online role-playing games that they do, advancing like to the next level, and I want to get there, and I want to do this next thing. And the the thing I think which is important, and I'm getting a text here from Andy with some good questions, and I'll address those in a second, but understand that here's a generation that can hold a lot of complex ideas simultaneously in their heads. And at the same time, if they're not rapidly rewarded for the work that they're doing, they might lose interest just as rapidly. So before I get to some of the questions, the suggestion that I have here, because millennials love games, is that you can gamify parts of their job. So without being childish, you can have things like leaderboards, you can have points for different things, giving them little badges, little rewards, tokens of appreciation. That can be as simple as some shout outs in staff meeting. That can be as complex as, we are looking to see the number of, times that staff remember to do this. And that's not necessarily something that's held out in front of the campers. It can be in the staff lounge, but like, remember to turn the lights out, remember to, put the canoes up on the rack, or whatever it might be. And it might seem like, oh gosh, do I really need to, little stickers every time someone does a thing that's part of their job expectation? Well, you don't have to, but if there are a few things that you do make into a game, like you have the inspection board and the cleanest cabin gets an extra dessert, then yes, it's going to be really reinforcing. And here's something that I know is difficult for a lot of us to execute simply because of the logistics of our job, but you got to be flexible with hours and responsibilities. That is to say, here's a generation that's used to bouncing around, much more so in surveys, and I was surprised to learn this. They care less about the dollar value of their salary than some, say, flexibility in when they take their night off, or when they might take their day off. So I think it's really important to to think about what are the ways that we can offer some flexibility. Like, you'll drive yourself crazy if you're remaking the schedule every day, but it might be possible to rotate the day off or night off schedule, or it might be possible to, if staff say, for once we'd like our night off to start before dinner and we'll be back by 9 p.m. instead of start at 9 p.m. and we'll be back, at midnight or something. Now, Andy's written an interesting question here, which is like, well, what do you do if people start to cry? And you've given some honest feedback, and they're very tearful. Don't be afraid of tears. Nobody has ever died from crying, so this is not life-threatening. You do not need to go get the defibrillator or anything like that. And I'm only partly speaking in jest here, because it has nothing at all to do with millennial generation or a generation gap, but we do sometimes worry as owners, directors, just as grown-ups, that you might say somebody cry. I think the best response to that is to say, I know, look, I can see that this is upsetting for you, and I'm guessing this might be the first time that someone has made this observation. I'm making this observation for you because I really have a commitment to your professional development, and if I didn't think that you were capable of making this change, then I don't even think I would suggest it. But not only do I think you're capable of making this improvement, I actually think you can take it a step further and excel in other ways that I haven't even anticipated. And in case you're wondering, our goal at this camp is to share honest feedback with everyone. So you might feel a little bit singled out, and maybe that's part of emotionally what you're feeling right now. But there's not a person here that's part of the organization that won't make some mistakes or that couldn't use some improvement. And once you talk at that moment about some of the times when you have gotten feedback, I think it's terribly effective to say, who gives you feedback? Is it like the kids who walk by that are 8 years old, and just because they're 8 and they're disinhibited and they don't recognize that you're any different from anybody else, they walk right up to the director and say, well, that sucked, or that meal was terrible, or and you think, wow, okay, nothing like the candor of an 8-year-old. The emotion, if you give somebody honest feedback, and again, I don't think you need to sugarcoat it. I don't think you need to do the Oreo cookie thing. I think you need to have more than half of the words that come out of your mouth in a given day be praiseworthy. and some portion be constructive criticism. And when you give it directly, kindly, not angrily, but with an interest, then an emotional reaction from a staff member is an indication that they aren't used to getting feedback, and you should sort of pat yourself on the back that you're helping them to develop a real world skill. You can certainly provide some empathy, like, I can see this upset you and maybe even surprised you. It might be one of the first times that you've gotten feedback that is this direct. And again, I'm sharing it because I care. Remember the importance of offering the rationale and the justification. I will say one other thing in response to this question about what if they are very emotional, what if they start crying. There's a person, and even if they don't start crying, anyone you've provided some constructive criticism to is someone that you should try to find later that day, the next day, or whenever there's an opportunity to praise. Somebody was late, the next time they're on time, give them a thumbs up, pat on the back. You don't have to have a big sit down talk. You just say, like, that's what I want to see. You know, how to be on time, a little wink, a nod, but they love to be noticed. Everybody does, not just millennials. We like to be noticed for doing something that we've been criticized for in the past. Right? That only makes sense. And I think once you show them that you're making an effort to not just see the things they might be doing wrong, but the things that they're doing well, they feel pretty good about that. All right, and number 10 here, as we wrap up our hour, millennials want careers. Okay, not a big surprise, but again, I want you to think about what's specific to this generation and the ways in which you might leverage that. So millennials, this is less scientific and more editorial, but they appreciate skill development for its own sake and for its career advantages. I said earlier that I certainly hope a lot of the talented people you're hiring will work for you for many summers, or if they're full-time, many years. Some of them are going to make a career out of camping, and that's awesome. The ones who do and the ones who don't will all benefit from the following. You formalize your alumni network and you connect your staff to alums. Regardless of how long they are with you, I've said a couple of different ways, when you show an appreciation for their career development, they're going to be more loyal to you because it's helpful and it feels good. So a cool idea that we tried at Belknap, and I wish I could take credit for this idea, but it certainly worked, and it was a wonderful idea that our co-directors, Seth and Stephanie Cassels, came up with, a career day. So what they did was, when we had our centennial in 2003, it began a process of formalizing our alumni network, where we actually began keeping an electronic spreadsheet of alums. And we began collecting, not just name and address and so forth, and tapping them for, donations. And by the way, if you are a 501c3 nonprofit, great, you can take those donations. If you're a private camp, I suggest you make a foundation that is the sort of nonprofit wing of your camp, and that can have its own board of directors and so forth, but that will allow you to accrue some funding for capital improvements, for camper scholarships and the like. Well, since we knew the careers of many of our alums, we wrote to some of them and said, hey, what we want to do is have one of the rest hours. We want the junior leaders and the LITs to cover the cabins. And we want the cabin leaders themselves, the 30 of them, to be able to rotate from one of the 5 divisional lodges to another. And here's what we'd like in the cadet lodge. We'd like a few alums who are in the entertainment business. In the junior lodge, we'd like a few alums who are in medicine or healthcare. In the middler lodge, we'd like a few alums who are in business or finance. In the Besser lodge, and so forth. And the alums were really excited, of course, to come back to camp. That was really fun. We had lunch for them before and kind of get together on the beach afterwards. But they spent an hour without anything prepared, no slides or anything else, just chatting with leaders who are on the staff, current staff who are maybe, let's say, 19, 20, 21, 22, about their careers, just open Q&A. And it was awesome. And staff really appreciated it. The alums loved interacting with the staff, really interested and surprised by some of their questions. And it was remarkable. A great way to, sort of work that network, and also a fabulous service to the staff. Cost the camp next to nothing. We didn't pay anyone to do it. We made an extra few lunches, but these are connections now that that staff really appreciate. And as I've been saying during this webinar, it was intentionally designed with an eye toward the needs of the staff that were different from what they were a generation ago, and really cool. You can also, as I said earlier, teach them how to frame their camp job professionally on their resume, in interviews, and in casual conversation. So never underestimating the importance of caring for other people's children. As many of you have heard me say before, perhaps there can be no greater responsibility. And I'll just wrap up by saying, millennials need you. There are a lot of competing demands on their attention, a lot of expectations for where they go to school and what they're going to end up doing and how much money they're going to end up making. And as I said to you at the beginning, they incur lots more debt than previous generations, and it's on their mind, a successful and lucrative career for that reason, and as well as others. But despite the rapidity with which they can, text and tweet and chat and post, we also see today that, socially, educationally, politically, change is as slow or slower than it ever was. And so they need you to help them pace things. I think it's really important to be a mirror and show them that, their progress, their connections, meeting some of their intermediate goals, the important work that they've done at camp, which of course has an overarching, mission or motto. Let them know that, there's nothing more fun than a summer at camp. But also I think nothing that's as powerful a personal and professional development vehicle. So it's just something that they need to hear over and over from you. Oh, this is great that you figured out how to do that. Or, you know what, you figured this out with your, group of kids. Imagine if you're the CEO of a company someday, how much better you're going to be at resolving a conflict among some of your, middle level managers. Or imagine, what good customer service you'll be able to provide as the owner of this or that company. And try to cultivate their patience by sharing your own personal trajectory. You want to encourage their professional innovation, but with a realistic sense of how much time it might take to achieve some of their goals. I think, if anything, the somewhat slower pace of life at camp, where you can take a rest hour, where you can watch a sunset, even though it feels to a lot of senior staff like you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, which many of us are, for staff and for campers, it should really be a downshift. And that is also important for their health and wellness, for them as future parents or executives, whatever they end up doing. I think the contrast that camp provides is essential. Camp is nothing if it's not a powerful countercultural vehicle for everyone's development. So I want to be respectful of your time. We have reached the end of our awesome hour, and while I regret that there wasn't an easier way to do chat, I'm super excited that people were able to just text me. So appreciate your flexibility. It's a hallmark of any camp professional. We figure out the workaround on the fly. And I would really love it if you want to stay in touch. The things I post on Twitter are links to my articles. So I try not to just say that, hey, I just walked into the restaurant and I want everyone to love that. Nothing wrong with doing that. But if you follow me on Twitter, you can expect a feed of professional materials. Same on Facebook. I've got some family stuff up there too. It's been fun. And my website is the same website it's always been, just renamed. drchristhurber.com, easier for people to remember. And I'd be delighted if you want to stay in touch. Lots and lots of my camp director friends will email me in the off season with quirky questions or set up a time to chat on the phone. Appreciate the shout outs from Matt Abrams, from Chris Listener, from Andy Schlensky, from Gabe Chernoff. It's so much fun to join you guys. I'm excited to be joining you probably next month. Gabe and I will figure out a time that works for people to talk about child safety way beyond parameters of safe touch. And if I have an opportunity to do that, I'll really enjoy it. So guys, thank you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon, the rest of your time together as a group. And for anyone who missed this, I will send Gabe the link to the recorded version. So guys, I'm Chris Thurber. Thanks a lot for inviting me, and I look forward to seeing you virtually, online, or in person sometime soon. Take good care.